Parents, what's the most shocking secret that you're hiding from your children? Hey everyone, the narrator from Mostly Facts has to take a break for a week or two, so I'm stepping in as the guest narrator on this channel until he returns. This way we can still bring you stories in the meantime. Thanks for your understanding. And with that being said, let's get started. Story 1. A colleague of mine has a friend who hid from her 8-year-old daughter that she, the 8-year-old, would pass within a few years because of a terminal illness she got. I can see this. My daughter was just born with a rare congenital heart defect. She'll be aware she has it as she grows, but at some point we're going to have to tell her she'll be lucky to live to 40. That conversation is many years away, but it churns my stomach thinking about the burden she'll carry. She'll be lucky to live to 40. I have a condition where the diagnostic and surgical techniques to fix it were incredibly crude 40 years ago, and I would have had a 50-50 shot of dying from it. Nowadays, it's incredibly rare that people die from this. So keep your chin up. 40 years is an eternity in medical science. Your daughter's condition might be treatable by the time her heart is overdue. My grandma never told my grandpa that he had Parkinson's and dementia. The last 2 years of his life were pretty bad, but I don't think he ever knew what was happening to him. About 90% of the time he was just gone, but every once in a while there would be a short period where you could tell he was mentally present. He knew something was terribly wrong but didn't know what, and kept asking when his medicine would start working. He didn't know the medicine was just to keep him calm and comfortable. It was a blessing when he finally passed away. I can't imagine being in a situation like that, where you suddenly come to and know something's wrong, but no one will tell you what. Then you drop off again and come back days or weeks later. He was a terrible human being, but I don't think even he deserved that. As a person who's worked pretty extensively in nursing homes, please tell your loved ones if they have dementia. If you don't, they will refuse help, refuse care, and suffer without understanding why. Usually, they do remember that they're sick if they were told that they were, and will be more accepting of strangers giving them medicine, trying to bathe them, telling them they have to sleep there, etc. Wow, this is a really heavy topic. It's heartbreaking to think about the difficult conversations and decisions that parents and caregivers have to make when a child or loved one is diagnosed with a terminal illness. On the other hand, it's understandable to want to shield a child from the harsh reality of their illness, especially if they're still so young and innocent. The idea of burdening them with the knowledge that their life may be cut short is a difficult pill to swallow. And it's natural to want to protect them from that pain. It's up to each individual and family to decide how to handle these different situations. But it's important to remember that communication and honesty are key, and that seeking support and guidance from medical professionals and support groups can make a world of difference. Story 2. I was the kid in the scenario. When I was like 12, my dad passed of leukemia. He was never around much, so I didn't see him often, but that was never the secret. I actually remember the day he took off and left us. Woke up one morning and there was a pile of new toys on the living room floor with a note for Mom. Anyway, he started coming around when he received the prognosis. We developed something resembling a positive relationship before he passed. When he passed, it absolutely destroyed me. I still remember the funeral. I had to be dragged kicking and screaming out of the car because I didn't want to see it. In his will, he left me his car, a Camaro that I was supposed to get when I turned 16. His parents fought tooth and nail to keep it from me. They were really shy people. His entire side of the family was. And we eventually just told them to F off and keep the damn thing. Fast forward about 15 years. I found out the guy that passed was not actually my dad. He was my brother's dad. My real biological dad has been living in the next town over, 20 minutes from my house, my entire life. My entire family knew about it, except for me. It was why my grandparents fought to keep the car. They knew I was not his son. I still don't know if he knew or not, but I assume so. My maternal grandmother has met him several times in my life. My mom said she never thought it was anything worth digging up. She said she intended for me to never find out. I've still never spoken to him. I know a name and an approximation of where he lives, as of about 10 years ago. Beyond that, I know jack about the guy. Grandma said if I ever wanted to meet him, she would help me contact him. I don't know if I ever will. Are you my husband? Was it a '79 Camaro? I'm laughing out loud at the idea that this happened to multiple people. We will call them Camaro kids. This is quite the story. It's hard to imagine what it must have been like for you to find out that the person you thought was your dad all those years wasn't actually your biological father. That must have been a huge shock and a lot to process. On the bright side, it's pretty cool that your fake dad left you his car in his will. A Camaro, no less. It's funny to think that there might be other people out there who've had a similar experience and now identify as Camaro kids. It's up to you whether or not you want to try to reach out to your biological dad. It's a big decision, and there's no right or wrong answer. But if you do decide to pursue it, it's nice to know that your grandma is supportive and willing to help you. Story 3. Not a parent, but a child. The last Christmas, I found out that not only was my mom had already been previously married and divorced, but my dad had a kid before he married my mom. So I have a half-brother or sister that I have never met. The real kicker was I found out from my new sister-in-law who had someone do some digging, found out, assumed that I must already know, and brought it up out of the blue on Christmas Eve while we were baking cookies. Why did she do some digging? My mom had alluded to it to my eldest brother a long time ago when he was a late teen after he got out of a really abusive relationship. About 5 years later, he met his current wife and married her. Sometime after that, he mentioned it to his wife, who had a really abusive family. Her mom had passed away, the only one in the family who cared about her, and I think it was meant to be a comfort thing, like she could talk to my mom about any trouble she felt or whatever. Well, needless to say, my sister-in-law got really interested that there was some dirt on my sweet, straight-laced mom who doesn't seem like the type to have any sort of past. It wasn't even a month after my sister-in-law found out that she pretty much spilled it to the whole family. She told me first, and I threw up out of shock. I quietly pulled my mom aside and made mention that her secrets might not be very secret any longer, just as a heads up. And then after that, in an entirely separate and non-related incident, I learned about the thing with my dad. Nobody else knows about our half-sibling except my sister. It was a pretty cruddy 2 days. Well, it seems like Christmas is the time for family secrets to be spilled. Move over, Santa. It's time for some family drama. I mean, who needs presents when you can have a half-sibling surprise? And of course, it wouldn't be complete without some good old-fashioned digging from the in-laws. Who needs shovels when you have Google? Am I right? But really, I'm surprised that there wasn't a big red bow on top of that family secret when it was presented on Christmas Eve. It's like a gift that keeps on giving. Awkwardness. But hey, at least now you have a great conversation starter for those family get-togethers. Hey, remember that time we found out we have a half-sibling? Good times. Story 4. That she can't have a relationship with her grandfather because he's a P-file, and I would never trust him. The rest of my family maintains a relationship with him and leans on me hard to open up communications because family comes first. They were absolutely right. My family does come first, which is why my daughter won't ever have to have a relationship with him. You're doing the right thing. I only found out a couple of years ago that my grandfather was a P-file and violated most of my aunts and maybe uncles. That also explained why about 90% of my uncles and aunts have been raging alcoholics for their entire lives. He wasn't really my grandfather. He took care of my grandmother when her husband left her and their 6 children. To me, he was the grandfather, and he was my godfather. I just don't understand why my otherwise perfectly fine parents had to stay over at my grandmother's place when he was always around. Nothing ever happened as far as I can remember, but I just don't understand why you would take that risk as a parent, no matter how small that risk might be. I have a daughter of my own now, and if that sucker would still be alive today, I would not let him anywhere near her. Oh yeah, he was a priest when he took my grandmother in, but had to leave the church a few years later. I wonder why. Story 5. Adoptive parent of 3 kids, 2 of which are biological siblings and cousins. Found out a year after the adoption that the biological parents were half-siblings who shared the same dad. The bio parents found out after they had the first child and proceeded to have another. The kids are now 16 and 13 respectively and have zero clue that they are the product of incest. Unfortunately, their biological grandpa just passed away, so there very well could be a big reveal coming in the near future. You probably already know this, but one generation of incest doesn't generally have any negative repercussions unless their dad and both moms all had the same genetic disorders. In my honest opinion, if you tell them, emphasize that even though it's socially weird, they're medically normal and a result of a consensual relationship. No abnormalities physically due to the incest. They were, however, neglected and malnourished in their early developmental years. This has caused them to be in the lower percentile for physical growth. They're both diagnosed with autism, which primarily affects their ability to form bonds. They're highly intelligent and just socially awkward. It's understanding to feel unsure about whether or not to reveal this information to the kids. However, I do think it's important for them to eventually know the truth about their biological parents and family history. It's better for them to hear it from a trusted source rather than finding out in a more traumatic way later on. Story 6. Not a parent, but my parents held this secret away from me for a long time. When I was 3 or 4, my dad volunteered at a baseball park to shuttle people back and forth on a golf cart. Well, one night, he didn't come home till really late, and I went to him, but stopped to see that he looked scared and distraught. He's normally a rough and tough kind of guy and has a big heart. So I asked him what was wrong, but he said nothing and that he was fine. I believed him and went to bed. I woke up the next morning to see that our cousin, who doubles as our babysitter, was at our house, but neither of my parents were. I asked where they went, and she said they went to the morning service of church and not the afternoon service. Again, I believed her and never questioned any of it. Fast forward 10 years, and my mom told me what really happened. He was shuttling some guy back to the parking lot when the guy put a knife to my dad's neck. He then proceeded to take my dad behind a dumpster and violate him. So when he got home, he waited for everyone to go to sleep and then tried to unalive himself by overdosing on painkillers. My mom woke up in the middle of the night, realizing that he wasn't in bed. She found him in the bathroom on the floor, motionless, and called 911, where he was sent to the hospital, where he was treated. He is thankfully still doing strong. I don't know where I would have been without him. Holy hell. Glad he survived. Story 7. My parents told me my sister is adopted. They didn't tell her. She's 34. By the way, what do I do? Buy the whole family DNA test kits for Christmas and watch the world burn. Savage, but actually intrigued on how that will go. There was a TIFU not too long ago where a teen thought it'd be fun to get an ancestry thing done, only to find out that his father was actually his uncle, and his world got turned on its head. Not sure how it ended, but I think one should be careful. Fires are hard to control. While I agree with people who have said it's not your secret to tell, I believe even more that she deserves to know. I would say you should strongly encourage your parents to tell her, and maybe even suggest to them that if they don't, you would like to. Then you aren't going behind their back. But it's going to come back to them eventually no matter what, so they need to be responsible and proactive. What was the point in telling you if they wanted it to perish a secret? Plot twist. Both children are adopted. They told each child about the other being adopted, but not themselves. Story 8. It was a secret until recently my mom told me. When she and my dad got divorced, things were very, very messy, and my dad would do awful things to dodge paying for my care. He ended up owing my mom a couple $1,000s, and my mom was ready to sue. But instead of getting the lawyers involved, and because she knew my dad was not a healthy person to be in my life, she offered him a deal. Keep the money, but relinquish custody officially. I'd still get to see him if and when I wanted, but he would give up all legal rights as a guardian. Because he hated paying my mom that much, he took $2,000 over me. Not a life-changing, earth-shattering secret, it's just revealing to know my dad values money more than me. Before anyone cast judgment on my mom, my dad was, and probably is, a piece of human garbage who abused me and allowed me to be abused a few years after this. So I'm 1,000% fine with my mom's decision. She's my favorite person in the world, and every single day I am so lucky to have her in my life. It takes a lot of courage to share a personal story like this, so thank you for trusting me with it. I'm sorry that you had to go through the trauma of abuse and neglect, and it's heartbreaking to hear that your dad valued money over being a parent. But I'm glad to hear that your mom was there for you, and that she made the difficult decision to protect you from further harm. Story 9. New throwaway for this one. that my adopted daughter was conceived as a result of a gang violation. Experts say you're supposed to give your adopted children all of their history when they're old enough. But honestly, if it were me, I would just rather not know. We're considering not even telling her. It weighs heavy on our hearts. As a person who was adopted and had no idea the story behind my biological parents, this is one of my biggest fears. I would not want to know that. That being said, everyone is different. I'm adopted, and I've pretty much actively avoided pursuing any knowledge about my biological parents beyond any medical or hereditary conditions. I've heard too many horror stories, so I'm good. As far as I'm concerned, they both died saving orphans and kittens from a fire. Story 10. When I was a teenager, I'm 22 now, I found out that when my mom had me, my dad did not believe I was his kid. He even demanded a paternity test so he didn't have to pay child support on me because he really thought my mom had cheated on him during a business trip she went on. I don't know why, but a paternity test was never done. Or maybe it was, and I've never been told. But it explained why I felt so distant with my dad for the first 10 years of my life. He always favored my older sister more when I was younger and called her daddy's little girl, etc. I felt like he hated me, and this explained why. Today, he's the best dad ever. I don't know if something shifted or what, but me and him are extremely close now, and he loves me endlessly. He's been such a great dad, especially when I felt self-unaliving in high school and had really bad depression and anxiety. My mom's a little bit bipolar, so I've always been in a toxic household, and he was the only one to come and pick me up and just be there for me. It's natural to feel distant or disconnected from someone who you thought was your father, only to find out later on that it might not be the case. It's never easy to navigate a toxic household, but having someone there for you who cares about your well-being and is willing to listen and offer support can make all the difference. Story 11. My son was planned, but after separating from his father when my son was 8 months old and having basically nowhere to go, no way to actually take care of us on our own, many times I thought about the possibility of dropping him off at the hospital and skipping town. I never did, and he's 8 now, and we're very happy. I just want to say this is a completely normal thought, but it's your actions that count. We all have thoughts we aren't proud of, but you persevered, and that's what matters. Don't feel ashamed of what you didn't do. Be proud of what you did. And to anyone reading this who honestly and genuinely doesn't feel like they can manage being a parent, you're not a horrible person if you admit that and make arrangements for your child to go to someone who can. Sometimes being the best, most loving parent you can be means admitting you can't be one. It's okay. Story 12. I'm not the parent, I'm the child. But my family kept it a secret that my brother was a child violator and that my grandpa had violated my mother and threatened to unalive us grandkids. I found out because I told my sister that my brother had violated me, and she told me about the rest. We were raised having a relationship with them like they were normal human beings. It's absolutely disgusting. My uncle violated all 3 of his sisters, and everyone acts like it's no big deal. It's just not talked about at all. I don't speak to him because my father told me when I was very young to never be in a room alone with him, but also because he's an insufferable runt who thinks he's better than everyone. How can you violate your 3 sisters and not at least have the decency to acknowledge you're at least slightly worse than most people? He doesn't have to be so smug about it.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 13. Before I found out I was pregnant with my first child, I took a big ton of pills. I think it's the closest I've ever come to self-unaliving. I had always dealt with anxiety and depression. I feel like the extra hormones put me over the edge. I found out about a week later that I was pregnant. Surprise! I was terrified the entire pregnancy that something would be wrong with him. Luckily, he was completely healthy and is an incredibly smart child. I've never told anyone. I feel so guilty. My sister didn't realize she was pregnant until she was about 3 months along. She was 21, so of course she had been drinking heavily the whole time. She said she couldn't figure out why she'd start throwing up only after a couple drinks, but she'd always go back and keep drinking. I guess her body succeeded in keeping the little guy safe because he's 6, and other than being a spoiled brat, there's nothing wrong with him. Story 14. I'm the child of a parent that hid something horrible until I was 21. One day when my parents had a domestic dispute, my dad called me just to get back at my mom. He said, "Do you want to know something about your mother? She slept with over 30 guys during our first 2 years of marriage." I just sat down and started stuttering. He said, "You know how people have said you look different than the rest of the kids?" I said, "Yeah." "That's because I'm always not your dad. Your mom slept with my best friend, and you were conceived. Another thing, your brother, the one just younger than me, I'm the oldest, belongs to my brother." My mom just bawled in the background without denying it. I just laughed. And then I went into 2 years of therapy. Story 15. My wife and I each have a child from a previous marriage. Both of our ex-spouses were abusive cheaters. Both children still adore and idolize their other parents, and we just keep smiling and nodding. This probably isn't the type of thing the original question was asking, but it is a secret that we will maintain for years. I feel like that's probably best until your kids are older. My mom did not hide that fact at all and rubbed it in my face, used it against me, and made me really hate part of who I was for a long time. Kids don't understand that it doesn't have to do with them, so good for you for letting them be kids for now. It's heartbreaking to hear about your past experiences with your mom and how she made you feel about your other parent. It's important to remember that children often see their parents as heroes, and it can be hard for them to comprehend the complexities of a divorce or abusive relationship. It's important to also have open and honest communication with your children as they get older and are able to better understand the situation. It's a delicate balance, but it sounds like you're doing what you believe is best for your kids. Story 16. My dad cheated on my mother while she was going through cancer treatments. My mother asked for a divorce. He said go, and take the kids. Every Valentine's Day, I would receive flowers from my dad and get so happy. My mom would smile and nod and get excited with me. I would call him and thank him. He never sent me flowers. It was my mom all the years. Same thing with birthday cards and Christmas gifts from him. They were never from him. My mom just put his name on them in similar handwriting. Went as far as writing return addresses on mail, too. My mom was a single parent. Story 17. I'm hiding a lot of things. I used to be an adult entertainer for 10 years, growing up in an abusive house. I partied hard and used to be part of the NYC and Montreal club scene. That I was kidnapped and taken to another country. There's a lot of things. Now I'm just a boring accountant mom to everyone. No one has a clue what I've been through. Crazy what your kids don't know about you. Honestly, drop the bomb if you see them heading down the same path. They'll poop their pants and it'll get the point across. It's understandable that you want to protect your children from your past, but at the same time, they might benefit from hearing about the dangers of certain lifestyles and the importance of making good choices. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide what to share, but just know that you're not alone, and there are people who care about you and your well-being. Story 18. My son was the product of violation. He just thinks I had really low standards in men at one point. Please, God, tell me you don't have to share custody with the father. Nope. He signed over his rights when my son was a toddler, but I allow his mother to be a part of my son's life. She's unaware of the violation as well. The bio dad died late last year, and I've debated telling her out of anger of hearing constantly how great of a person he was for the last 14 years, and then in death. Story 19. That we don't go to bed at the same time as they do. That's me every night at bedtime. Daughter. Books? Me. No more books. Time for night-night. Daughter. Books? Me. No more books. Time for night-night. Daughter. Mama? Me. Mama went night-night. Time for night-night. Daughter. Daddy? Me. Yes, I'm going night-night too. It's 6:45. Of course I'm not going night-night. Sounds like she has her priorities in order. Story 20. I'm the child, 48 female, but my father told me my mother was dead all throughout my childhood, and everyone in the family, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, stepmother, supported the lie. Not because my mother was on substances or abusive or a criminal, or even a bad one because they had a huge argument one night and she went to stay with a friend without me, So he decided she would never be allowed to be in my life again, ever. He wrote her off. On my 18th birthday, she called our house and asked to speak with me. So I found out the truth. Story 21. My son's older half-sister violated him, and that's why we don't see them anymore. Waiting until we could get into a psych for support before we break it to him. I'm really glad that you stopped all contact and looked to get him professional help. I know people in similar situations, but the family still keeps them around or stays in contact. Thanks. He did get professional help when it happened, but he was only 3. We think he remembers it, but wants us to say it. His school thinks it has a lot to do with current behavior and learning difficulties, so it's time to face it and hopefully put it behind us for good. Story 22. Grandpa's not their grandpa. I didn't find out until I was 30 that my dad adopted me and my mom was married to someone else when I was born, my 15-year-old. I was looking at those DNA kits in the store. I wonder what surprises it would find. Oh, more than you think, sweetie. I'll tell them someday, just not where the right time is. Then again, that's what my parents told me when I asked why they never told me about Bio-Dad until he reached out to me and blew their secret. That's a lot to process. I'm sure it must bring up a lot of questions and emotions. It's understandable that you would want to tell your kids someday, but it's important to find the right time and way to do it. Story 23. I'm the child, but my dad waited till I'm grown up to tell me that my mom gave me a lot of sleeping pills when I was a little child so she could leave me alone at home to maintain a relationship with her lover while my dad was working in another country. That cleared up many things. People are brutal. Wow, sorry, man. Actually, same thing happened to my kids. My ex would do this when I worked graveyard, so they wouldn't hear her bringing home guys. Story 24. My wife is not the biological mother of our twins. We did IVF, and their biological mother was an egg donor from a country in South America. My wife carried them and gave birth to them, but has no biological connection. We'll tell them someday when they're older. It's a little bit strange, but one looks exactly like me at that age, and the other one looks very much like my brother. Story 25. I'm working out how to explain that the chicken we eat is the same as the chickens that I live on a farm. This is my parents' favorite story to tell. Apparently, I got lost in a McDonald's while eating chicken nuggets and then choked out, "Then what does bread come from?" in between sobs. Then what does bread come from? Crushed dreams. Story 26. My daughter knows that her grandparents are getting a divorce. She doesn't know that it's because Grandpa, 72, decided to knock up a 23-year-old. We will talk about it when she's older, but I don't want to normalize that relationship for a pre-adolescent. So the aunt will be younger than the niece? Quiet down, Jon Snow. Wise decision. Story 27. That I don't actually enjoy watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. My 2-year-old would be devastated because that's our show. Well, hot dog, hot diggity dog. I was so relieved when my kids started watching SpongeBob. This is the caliber of secrets I'm here to read. I totally feel you on this one. I mean, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is all right and everything, but after the 300th episode, you start to feel like you're losing your mind. And don't even get me started on that hot dog song. It's catchy, I'll give you that, but it's like it's been designed to specifically drive parents insane. Story 28. My mom kept it a secret that the woman I was named after, her mom, my grandma, was stabbed to death by my uncle when my mom was 18. I always suspected my grandma had a tragic death because of how my mom would avoid talking about it, but I didn't know it was that tragic. Is the uncle dead or in prison? What happened to him? Story 29. That I've been changing every clock in the house on New Year's Eve to 3 hours early. At 9 p.m., we celebrate the New Year, then hang out for an hour. He thinks he's breaking every rule and has a great time. Now that he's turning 11, this will never happen again, with Bones and being somewhat smarter. Story 30. My daughter was conceived at work on airport property in the back of a frickin' Ford Focus while we were waiting for a med flight to land. She knows nothing about this, but tells me she wants to be a pilot when she grows up. Story 31. My father found out when he was in his 40s that his father was not his biological father. His mother, my grandmother, literally cheated on her husband with the milkman. Man, milkmen were just laying pipe every freaking where way back when, weren't they? Story 32. Posting here so when my kids are old enough to snoop, they get a split second of excited expectation before they're greeted by my saying, I do really enjoy having spicy time with their mother. Username checks out. Parenting game 10 out of 10. You mother friender. Story 33. I'm a child. I recently found out about the unaliving and self-unaliving attempt my great-grandmother tried to commit on her family. Her daughter, my grandmother, survived the attack and some years later moved to Canada as a teen and eventually got married and had my dad. Pretty haunting. Story 34. My whole family thinks I'm awful with money because I'm super broke despite having a good job, but I'm actually socking away every spare penny to put my niece through college and to take care of my parents when they can't work anymore. Story 35. I have a copy of Grand Theft Auto hidden behind some books on a shelf. The perfect hiding place. Impressive. My father used to hide his gun in the vegetable drawer. Story 36. After reading a bunch of these, I feel pretty good that my most messed up secret is that I eat most of their Halloween, Easter parade candy when they're at school.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.